What is up, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. My name is Ramon, and this is Dad's Podcast Project. What we are going to be talking about today is Toy Story 4, and not so much the movie, so to speak, but the fact that it was the first movie that I got to take my son to go see. This was his first movie experience, his first time in the theater. I wasn't really sure how it was going to pan out, whether we were ever going to be able to see it for its entirety from beginning to end, or were we going to have to leave? So that's what we're going to get into today. So fortunately, we were able to see it from beginning to end, and it was a pretty good movie. I'm more partial to the third one, to be honest. I think that one was definitely one that they could have ended on. They didn't necessarily have to continue this series much further. However, to get the characters back together, to make another one for the kids out there, I see why they did it. It was a good film. I wasn't regretting sitting through it myself, and my son definitely enjoyed it. So taking him to the theater, I really had to prepare myself mentally, like, how is this going to pan out? There were a few things that I had to be okay with going into things. I had to be okay with the fact that we might not have even made it through the previews. He may very well have just wanted to get up, call it quits right then and there, and go home. And much to my surprise, he actually did. We didn't even make it through. We were like the second to the last preview before the film was going to start. And already he was like, I need to go home. Let's go. And it's like, okay, well, how about we sit through this? You know, the movie's already started. Don't you want to see Toy Story 4? You've been talking about this for the past 2 weeks and mentioning it ever since the preview first came out, however many weeks before that. And so just trying to convince him that, you know, we are here to see this movie. I know that these previews aren't the movie, and really conveying that, you know, we don't have control over this. At home, we can fast forward, we can rewind, we can jump ahead. We have full control of the film that we're watching. But because this was his first movie theater experience, he was learning for the first time that when we come here and it starts playing, we can't stop it. We can't go back. We can't jump ahead. We can't skip these previews. This is what the movie experience is about. And so we arrived kind of early to the theater. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but we arrived a little early. And we ended up hanging out in like the arcade area. I knew that I needed to kill some time before the previews were going to start. And if anything, I thought to myself, it might be even more beneficial for us to go in while the previews are going. That way he doesn't have to sit through too many of them. So we hung out in the arcade area, and he's still at that imagination age where he doesn't necessarily need to be playing the games. He can imagine he's playing the games. So I didn't have to fork over any extra cash for tokens, which, if I can do a little mini rant, movie tickets are not cheap, at least for children. My son's ticket was about 30 cents or 40 cents less than my ticket. I would imagine it would be a couple dollars cheaper for children to go versus the adult ticket. That was not the case. But rant over. That's, again, we were going to go see it anyways. So our movie tickets were pretty close in price. So we go in, we sit down. Already, like, this was another thing that, I mean, everything kind of has to be, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but one of the things was you get to pick where you're going to sit. So I wanted to be close to the exit in case he needed to use the restroom, which I made it a point that he did that first. Before we go in there, before we sit down, let's go ahead and use the restroom, because I knew that was going to be a potential. He might need to get up during the film to use the restroom. So we did that. Then we go in, and we're supposed to have assigned seating. Like you pick the seat that you're going to sit in before you even go. So I wanted to make sure that he would be semi-close to the aisle so we can just get out, but not all the way to the edge, because prime seating is definitely in the center. So We tried to get as close to the center as possible, but there were like two grown women who, like, the aisles are lettered and the seats are numbered, and they were in our aisle, in our seats. And I didn't want to really raise a stink about it because I know that, at least at this theater, I'm a local. I know that not everybody shows up. So rather than being that guy saying, oh, these are our seats, it's like, whatever. We went ahead and sat just the two a little bit farther away from them. So it wasn't too much of a big deal. But as a parent who was thinking, let's go ahead and get in there, maybe midway through the previews, there are other parents who think the same thing. So the movie's getting going. And if you're a regular moviegoer, teenager, you're dating, you're going to the movies, or you're an adult and you're checking out movies, it's a lot different. You get in there, you get your seat, you try to get there as early as possible, and you wait. But when you're a parent, again, this was my first experience taking my son to see a movie. Everybody goes in like last minute because kids cannot sit that long without anything going on. So because of that, people started like really piling in. And I'm thinking to myself, this aisle on the screen when I was picking out seating was mostly all picked. So now the odds were stacked against us. Were we going to be that group that is sitting in somebody else's seats? And then I was fully prepared to tell those women, hey, I looked at my ticket. You're actually in our seats, and just have that be a whole ordeal. But again, it's like, we were fortunate it didn't happen. Next time going forward, I think that as soon as we go in, if somebody's in our seats, it's just knowing that parents are also on that same page. They're going in as late as possible. I'm just going to have to tell somebody because the lights are already out. I don't want to have that conversation with another adult about assigned seating in the dark. So I think that next time I'm definitely going to have to, if I see it, I'm just going to have to point it out because other parents, again, like I said, they're coming in late too. I don't want to sit in somebody else's seat. I don't want to have that conversation like, well, I'm sitting here because someone else sat in my seat, so maybe you find another seat. That's not the way it should work. So, and anyways, these two women, they didn't even have children with them. So they were actually coming because they wanted to see the film. And I don't even understand. But again, maybe that's just ranting way too much here. I definitely don't want to do that. But the movie finally starts, and it's just, it was a pretty cool film. They answer a question maybe some people had. I don't want to get into spoilers yet, but we will eventually. When we get there, I'll provide a spoiler warning. But we're sitting through the film, and do you know that feeling that you get when you're, like, say, the Avengers film, the Avengers Endgame, that one just came out, when these epic moments are happening in the movie, the crowd is getting involved as well. Certain moments happen when the crowd is cheering. Certain moments happen when the crowd is just riled up, when they're just applauding. There are these same moments that occur in these children films and that happen in the theater. And I didn't really think that was going to be something that I would experience. I thought that we would just go see this movie. There'd be some giggles, some laughs, but no, that was like kids yelling out, kids repeating what the characters are saying, kids answering the characters on the big screen. Even my son was getting involved with it, and it was a real blast being able to witness that. That was one of the highlights for me, because I didn't think that. I just didn't think that was going to happen. We watched these Toy Story movies at the house, like on repeat, and it's just like just watching the film. Yeah, he gets up and he'll dance or he'll sing along to the songs, but the first time he was watching the movies, he wasn't involved. And maybe it's because we're at home and it's not in a movie theater setting. Maybe because there aren't other kids around who are doing the same thing. So it was definitely an experience. And I had a blast. The other thing was he started getting really thirsty. And I didn't I didn't buy snacks. I didn't buy any sodas because again, I didn't know if we were going to get up halfway through the film or even 5 minutes into the film and have to leave. So then that became one of my bargaining chips because on 3 occasions he wanted to get up and leave. And these 3 moments stood out to me because it's when none of the action is happening. It's actually when the dialogue is taking place. So he's getting bored and it's like, okay, I need to go home now. Let's just leave, Dad. It's like, okay, well, you want that water, you want that juice, like just give it a little bit more and then we'll head home and we'll get you a big juice or we'll get you a big water. And that was how I negotiated with him. And it was cool. We made it from beginning to end. So 2 of the things that he didn't like with the theater, one of which was the audio. Movie theaters are really loud. Kids' ears, they're like fresh, they're brand new ears pretty much. They're not as broken in as some of our adult ears. So hearing was hypersensitive for him. He expressed to me that the movie was actually too loud at times. So that was one of the things he didn't like. The other thing he didn't like was how dark it was. Though my wife had taken time to prepare him and let him know that when the movie starts, the lights are going to come down, it's going to get darker, he did mention he wanted the lights on. And I had to remind him in the theater that this is actually a part of the experience. They turn the lights off. We're not in control here. We paid to come here and this is the experience. And so those were the two things he didn't like. He did enjoy the movie. I think his favorite character was definitely the one voiced by Keanu Reeves, which is like the Canadian version of, what was his name? It's like the Canadian Evel Knievel. And that was definitely his favorite character in this film. He was laughing a lot, and we'll see if they make that toy. And if they do, then we may just buy that for our son as well. I'm surprised he didn't want to take any of his Toy Story toys because a friend of ours had purchased a Woody toy for him. And my wife and I, for Christmas, this past Christmas, of course, we purchased him Buzz Lightyear. And I was surprised. I thought he would have wanted to take those. But then my mind was thinking, I don't know how to take the batteries out of those either. And I don't want him, pulling that drawstring or pushing those buttons while other people are trying to watch the movie. But he did take his stuffed little dog. And that, though I wasn't able to take the batteries out, it did have a power button. So he enjoyed that. He watched the movie with his little stuffed animal. And all in all, we had a really great time. So I definitely look forward to taking him to seeing more movies. He looked at least semi-interested in Frozen 2, only because Elsa, her powers are much like Frozone's in The Incredibles, and I think that he really likes that like ice kind of powers. And Trolls actually looks pretty good. There's another film coming out, it's an animated version of The Addams Family, but that looked too scary for him. And it is coming out around Halloween, so maybe when he gets older, he'll be interested in films like that. However, as soon as he saw the preview, it was like, that one looks scary. And it's like, okay, well, we won't see that then, but we may see Frozen 2, and depending on if he's up for it, we may see Trolls 2 as well. So I want to talk spoilers for those of you who are interested and may not see this film or might want a little review of the movie. So this right here is the warning. This is also kind of the end of talking about my movie experience with my son. So if you were listening for that, I don't think I'm going to have any more in the remainder of this episode. So thank you for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, be sure to leave that like and subscribe. And that's your spoiler warning right there. Go see the movie. I give it definitely see it in theaters with your children. And after you've seen it, if you care to hear my take on it, come back and jump ahead to this portion of the podcast. So that's it. That's your spoiler warning. Hopefully you guys are gone by now. The movie was really good. It wasn't as good as Toy Story 3 in the sense that it didn't like pull on my heartstrings. That movie just totally broke me down on the inside because, we grew up with these characters over the years and you build an attachment, but then when you become a parent, it changes you a little bit because now you're seeing Andy as he's grown up and he's going off to college and he no longer needs these toys. There are toys that I played with as a kid that I no longer play with, and it really hits you on an emotional level. And so we jump back 9 years to when all of the gang are still with Andy and they're pulling off another mission. And they go back 9 years ago because they answer the question of what happened with Bo. Bo Peep and the one sheep with 3 heads. They answer that question of what happened with her. Apparently someone must have bought her. I'm imagining like Craigslist, or I don't know if eBay was out at that time in the movie universe, but something like that. He ends up buying it, and Bo actually, like, Woody's trying to save her, like, we'll bring you back in the house. But she just tells him, that's my time. The little girl, Molly, doesn't want her anymore. It's time for her to be with a new child. And he has this feeling of, well, I still have Andy. She's like, I'm not Andy's toy. But she kind of tells him, you can come with me. Toys get lost all the time. Toys get put in the wrong boxes. And he's really left at a crossroad right there. Does he go with Bo, or does he continue to stay with Andy? And now we already know he stays with Andy, but this was just that conflicting moment that he had. And then they jump ahead and they do a really nice kind of time lapse explaining like just their lives together with Andy. And they're showing Andy as he's growing up and getting older. And then it transitions to now they're with Bonnie. And really just all the stuff with Bonnie is just kind of filler. I think that this film entirely was just to tell Woody's story of how he was going to move on. Because his time as a toy and taking care of his child was with Andy. And it really wasn't going to be with Bonnie. That he wasn't the favorite toy. He was actually not even being played with as much anymore in this film. And because of that, his purpose had almost just been ended, even though he wouldn't want to see it or admit it for himself. And there's a lot of these key moments that kind of happen where he's trying to pass the torch with Forky, who surprisingly enough is actually a funny character. Is he just like this kind of spork, kind of weird thing? Like I didn't know his full involvement as a character in this movie, but it's beginning to end. Like he is Bonnie's new favorite toy. And Woody is kind of passing that torch of how important he is to her. Even though his main purpose or his inner voice has been just go to the trash, just be thrown away. I'm used once and I'm thrown away. I have no purpose. I have no need to bring fulfillment to somebody. And when Woody finally makes that convincing little speech to him, he realizes I do have a purpose. I do need to be there for her. And a lot of the transition throughout the rest of the film really was just kind of filler for that. It was to move Woody's character on to something else. And he comes across this antique store because they're going on like a road trip. And he comes across this antique store where in the reflection through the glass or cast down onto the pavement, he sees a pattern of lights that is familiar to him. And it's actually the pattern that Bo's lamp gives off when the light is on. And he turns around and there is no Bo and there is no lambs. So he goes into the antique store and he's looking for her in there. And this is where we meet who I think would be the antagonist of the film. However, she turns out to not be, at least in comparison to Lotso, the stuffed strawberry smelling bear from episode 3, even Sid from the first movie, and not episode 3, I'm sorry, movie number 3, or the third film, or Sid from the first film, or gosh, who was it in the second? I can't quite recall the second one. It was not one of my favorite ones, but the bad guy of the film, you would imagine, would be this doll who apparently has a broken voice box, and Woody has a working voice box. His voice box is the drawstring in his back, and she wants it, but he's sewn shut. So in order for her to get this, he has to be dismantled. And it leaves you thinking, okay, the whole twisted side of things is she's going to do whatever it takes to get that, which she kind of does. But upon receiving it, like, to just jump ahead, upon receiving the voice box, it's really just to make herself more appealing to a child that keeps coming into this antique store. She just wants to be loved by a child. And Woody ends up making that selfless sacrifice in order to get Forky back because, well, she has Forky. And ultimately, that little girl doesn't want her. And so all this time, all these years that she's been sitting on the shelf, she's never had an owner. She was created with this defective voice box, and to be turned down by a child is like gut-wrenchingly heartbreaking for her. And you automatically shift gears and you kind of feel for her. I never really felt the feeling that she is the enemy in this movie. I had that feeling definitely with the first film, and as I mentioned, with Sid, and the third film with Lotso. And it's going to bother me that I don't remember. Oh, the antagonist of the second one was the collector, the Al's Toy Barn, the chicken guy, the chicken man, him. So you definitely have these evil characters, these characters who are just trying to do the main characters who you view as the good guys harm or just something bad to them. And this one, it didn't really feel that way. Felt like she had her own kind of pure intentions as to why she was doing the things that she was doing. And she doesn't even force Woody in the end to give up his voice box. She makes her plea. She makes her case to him. This is why I need this. You've had your child, and you've been fortunate enough to have a second go with Bonnie. But here, I think I don't even know why I want to say her name is like Annabelle, because I know that's a horror movie character, but it was something similar to that. And he finally just realizes that, yeah, I guess it's the right thing to do. I've had my run with 2 other children, and it's your turn to at least experience one. One of the characters that actually stood out, though, was, as I mentioned earlier, Keanu Reeves' character. He did like a really great job. His character was extremely funny, Canadian daredevil, and it was funny to watch him. My son, he definitely got a kick out of that. And in the end, there was no real tearjerker moment for me. It was just, okay, this is where Woody's going. He decides to stay with Bonnie. He doesn't decide to stay with Bonnie. He decides to stay with Bo. And he parts ways from the rest of the gang. And now maybe that would have hit some of you in the feels, but for me, it didn't. It was just his transition. And we didn't get to stay for the credits. My son, he was already over it by that point. He wanted to go home. He wanted his juice or his water. So we ended up heading out after that. But I think that it was a really great way to end it, to allow Woody to continue on his life for himself. He had been living selflessly ever since his creation for Andy, for Bonnie. But Bo was bringing in this concept that was foreign to him, to live for himself, experience the world. And she was definitely getting on well enough, being what would be considered a lost toy. And now that it's just through chance encounter that their lives intersected once again, that they now get to share this together. They now get to experience the world without being someone's toy together. And I really like that. I'm interested to see if there will be a fifth one. If there is, I'm not exactly sure what it would be about. I think that at this point, it almost opens it up to kind of just recreate the series altogether. Have a new kid, all new toys, and maybe a nod to some of the throwback characters. But it's almost like we've got the story arc for Woody the Cowboy and for Buzz Lightyear and a lot of these others. And it's like you can almost start the story out fresh. So I'll be interested to see if they do something like that. But this was a 10 out of 10 experience for me. This was something that I had been waiting since before my kids were even born to be able to share my love of going to the movie theater and seeing movies on the big screen with my kids. Today it was with my son. In a year or so, it'll be with my daughter. And pretty much it'll be all of us as a family going and seeing these movies. And it's going to be a lot of movies for them in the beginning, but eventually we'll start to see movies that transition and start to pique all of our interests. A lot of these kid films, they do a lot of fan service for the adults. They enter some humor in there for us to enjoy. But the Toy Story series in itself has been entertaining for me since I've seen the first, all the way till this one. So it wasn't something completely just, I'm just here for my son. Like, I wanted to see this movie too. So it's definitely what I signed up for when being a father. I think that raising children is definitely one of the greatest responsibilities we can have as adults. And one of those rewards that we get with being parents is being able to share in some of the experiences that we love. For me, it's movies. It's going to the theater. And I was just riding high. As soon as the lights went down and, the marquee comes up, I was just like, this is what it's about. This is definitely the dad life right here. But that's kind of my spoilery review. That's my taking my son to the movies. And thank you guys again for taking the time to listen to these podcasts. And as always, you guys, till next time, see ya.